Hello, everyone. I'm Carinna. I use she, her pronouns. I am short stature, curly brownish, blonde hair, depending on who you ask. Wearing a green shirt that's Power to Be saying everyone belongs in nature, black pants, and a jacket. And coming to you today, my home I'm a settler on the traditional lands of the Hosenich people. I live in Victoria, and I'm very grateful to be here today. I work for a charity called Power to Be. We're based in both Victoria and Vancouver, and we do inclusive and accessible outdoor adventures for people of all ages and all different abilities, starting as young as a child when we're working with families to as old as seniors, and everything in between. We don't really have a cutoff, which makes us unique. And there's so many whys. I've been with the organization for almost 20 years. But really started like many of us in this world is I was in a canoe and I was at a camp with children with autism and having a really tough time figuring out how to support this individual. And all of a sudden the weather and the water and the navigation were with me and helped this individual calm down and find their place and put their hands in the water. And I saw that ripple and I was like, I don't know what just happened, but I really love this and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for still staying here at the end of the day. I hope you're going to enjoy this session. My name is Yenny. Black hair, brown eye, and a very Asian face. So I come from China, and I immigrated to Canada back to 2015, end of 15. I first landed in Alberta, and 2016 on Canada Day, I moved to Kamloops. When I moved to Kamloops, I first, as a new immigrant, a newcomer, it's really difficult to navigate a lot of informations, and then it's hard to settle just by myself. But the amazing Kamloops has so many resources for me, and then sooner enough, I know about organizations called Kamloops Immigrant Services. They provide so many services to newcomers. And I walk into the door, and they forever becomes my home. 2018, so I was becoming a client of Kamloops Immigrant Services and the KIS. And 2018, that opportunity came, so I started to work at the Kamloops Immigrant Services as a community connections coordinator. So that's become the time I start to giving back after I receiving so much support and resources from KIS. And I start to knowing a lot more about newcomers' needs. And I'm so grateful for the KIS give me the opportunity, and still until today, I can still be able to advocate for newcomers, for the needs, and then find a way to meet the needs. Thank you.
Always amazing to hear the stories of you folks. I mean, everyone, would you believe that this is the first time that all of us have come together in person to meet like this? Always such incredible stories to tell, and each and every one of us in this room has our own unique story when it comes to recreating and spending time outdoors. Now, as we start to really think about how we are connecting with nature, it's also important to take into account really that, again, so many equity deserving groups across BC might not necessarily have the same kinds of supports and opportunities that many of us do. And so for each of us here on this panel, we each work with our own types of communities, different types of groups, whether they are people with disabilities or newcomers to the region. And so the first question that I really wanted to ask everyone today, and be incredibly grateful if you could also share your answers with the audience, is that could you please get started by sharing with us a little bit about the stories of your communities? Do they normally see themselves as being able to recreate outside, outdoors? And if so, or if not, what barriers are they experiencing?
Am I starting off?
I'm happy for anyone on this panel.
Okay,
to
I'll
get us
start us
started.
off. So I think people with disabilities don't often see themselves represented in outdoor recreation spaces be that through communications or social media or just the stories we tell collectively as a culture about outdoor recreation, though I do see that changing. And I think that that lack of representation kind of influences those kind of intrapersonal barriers, perceptions of personal capabilities and limitations. I think without that representation as well, like the general public also doesn't see people with disabilities belonging in these spaces, which can influence, assumptions and attitudinal barriers, which, do have real impacts and can influence, who is included and who is not. And there are many barriers that prevent people with disabilities from participating in outdoor recreation. I'm not going to touch on all of them here, but one big one that we focus on are physical barriers in the built environment. So things like trail infrastructure, signage, parking, which are so important, but I think it is important to think, bigger than that and look at the other factors that shape people's experiences in getting outside. Research consistently points to lack of information as being a significant barrier to participation for people with disabilities. So not having, detailed and accurate trip planning information, not having detailed trail information, just to support people to know and what to expect before they arrive. People with disabilities are unlikely to invest their time, energy, and money to coming to a park or a rec site or another outdoor recreation space if they don't know if their access needs are going to be met, if they don't know if they're going to be met with a high quality experience. So I see those information barriers as a very high priority across the recreation sector and one that I'm really keen to address. And I also see it as a pretty low cost barrier to address as well compared to the physical built environment, all these big capital projects. And I just want to touch briefly on social barriers as well, because not everyone has the social support to get outside, or everyone's just recognizing that everyone is starting at a different place in their journey in outdoor recreation. Some people might need the extra support and encouragement to get outside and try new things, maybe test the limits of what they thought was possible with a disability. And that barrier, the social barrier, isn't one that we can address on our own as a land manager. And I think that's where our partnerships with community groups really come to play in there and really shine a light on that. Getting people with disabilities out into parks in a supportive way through programming and events. And we can provide the most accessible park ever, but we're not going to address all those barriers. I think partnership and working with communities is really key in that. And so I just touched on a couple barriers, but I think what's really needed to address these are a multi-pronged approach and just getting everyone working together. I think we need the practitioners, the land managers, the researchers, the users, the community groups, all working together to help move that dial on accessibility and inclusion.
Thank you, Brittny. You brought up a lot of really interesting and important, valuable points that I hope people are taking note to. And I would say, for Power to Be, we are built on partnership, and our reputation definitely helps to guide that. So we don't have to necessarily advertise our programs because we're in community. We're showing up at other people's events. We are supporting other people's initiatives. And so a lot of people find us through recommendations, word of mouth, working with schools, physios, OTs, park professionals who know somebody that would really love our programs. And our unique service we're offering is we're supporting some folks that have a lived experience that they're born with, and others that are acquired over time. And so thankfully in Victoria, there is a large amount of information people can learn about different resources. And we've been around for almost 28 years. And so our reputation, thankfully being strong, helps people to get out there. But, to remember back to the why is, one of our participants mentioned to me recently that when she had her spinal cord injury, her identity changed completely. And she was an adventurer, and that completely shifted, and she didn't know who she was. And then through organizations like Power to Be and others, she was able to regain a new version of herself. And then she's actually said that she's gone to new locations that she wouldn't have gone to prior to her accident. But this is about a relational approach. It's about meeting her where she's at and having that entry level into the opportunities that we're offering and redefining what that new experience and that new normal is for her to have. And she's one of over almost 2,000 participants that we're serving. So we work with a lot of community organizations like, newcomer organizations, folks that are supporting people with acquired brain injuries. And so they're really being able to come here and see their participants in a way that they weren't able to experience in their own service. And together we're creating that holistic approach.
what's the experience, like a past almost 10 years experience working at the Kamloops Immigrant Services, that I can see, I would say the answer is yes and no. We have some clients, newcomers, they see themselves participate in a lot of outdoor activities and recreations, but most of them that interested but not able to. There's multiple reason, and then the factor is a lot of barriers. I actually curious, like in our audience here, how many of us moved to Canada within 5 years? Do we have any newcomers in here? One. And that's amazing. Myself now is 10 years. So the reason why I'm asking this, it's in the journey of the newcomer for the first 5 years, those barriers are so different than the folks that are born in Canada, because the barriers, it's settlement barriers. What settlement barriers is that? Imagine a family of 4 to 6 people. They here, one of them study in TRU, and then one of them started looking for the job. Or they have 2 children. So you can see, imagine this family. One of them, maybe sometimes the partner, the English is not so great. So there was so much for them to navigate, a lot of information, right? Where do I do this? Where do I go? And they need to learn language first. So at our agency, we provide a free language training. So they need to improve the language. So that is a biggest barrier for the language. And then secondly, is you can see when a big family, another big barrier is the finance. A lot of people, when they come over here, some of them may already spend a lot of money just to move to another country, trying to settle. So it's really difficult for them just arrived in here without a job, especially. Now, when they get ready, especially now the English improved, now when they get ready and they're looking for the jobs. So the priority is I wanted to have food on our tables. I want to have money to support the families. Another priority is I need to take care for my children. I need to learn the school systems. I need to be able to support my children. And if the parents are here with them, they need to be able to support the parents as well. So you can imagine when the family in this situation, they're not going to be able to afford a car at the first few years, then transportation is another big barriers. Now, another barrier is the culture, the recreation culture and lacking of informations. Even like as me, as example, even I live in here for 10 years, sometimes I still struggle. I still feel overwhelmed a lot of information. Example, like this winter, I took the avalanche course. I think my instructor somewhere here. He can approve. He witnessed how struggle I am when I took his course in TRU downstairs here, and the slides go through so fast. Sorry, and a lot of like turns and the information. And I was taking the photos back home. I need to use Google Translator or AI help me fully understand some of the words. So can you imagine, like someone like me here, already 10 years, how much it would be for a newcomer just arrived in Canada, right? So language is the biggest piece. Another also is that those overwhelmingly the situation, the feeling is preventing them wanted to get out, no transportation, and then don't know about the weather or the wildlife here. Back home, where I coming from, there's no bear, there's no rattlesnake, there's no coyotes. We don't even have an eagle. So, and you can see it's when you unknown, you don't know about wildlife, and imagination gets you, and then you're scared. You're so scared. of all those wild animals, you don't know what I'm gonna do when I get in the trails. Even now, finally, my friends can give me a ride to go for a little hikes, and then boom, those snakes coming out. It's scary ahead of me. So, so those most of the newcomer, they this is the majority of the barriers, right? And then to trying to navigate. So usually in the newcomer that we serve, they usually really start enjoying the outdoor recreation when they really settle a little bit, find a job. That's firstly when they can speak some sort of a language, when they start feel comfortable, confident, start to speak English with people, they can ask some questions. Then you can see they start to feel comfortable to join some social activities. If those outdoor activities or program that we offer that is really family friendly, we cannot just offer to the parents. What about the kids? We cannot also just serve it to the kids, but what about those parents? So we need to keep all this into mind. And then when they feel, what you offer is friendly, then slowly they start to, okay, I can participate a lot outdoor recreation. So this just like overall, like some of the major barriers that a newcomer facing. I might not cover all of it, but I just want to share some major we encountering, including myself. I'm still.
That's absolutely incredible, Yenny. Thank you so much for all of our panelists for sharing some of the work that they're doing with their communities there. Now, after listening to each and every one of your stories, folks, it really starts to remind me and makes me recall that a one size fits all solution for all types of outdoor recreation just doesn't really work for any type of system. What we're starting to say really is that different types of community groups require different types of supports, and we do need to be able to pull them into these conversations if we're meaningfully going to be creating opportunities for them to engage with outdoor spaces. Now, despite the fact that all of you folks have shared very different barriers that some of your communities are experiencing, I'm also starting to see a little bit of a common thread that pulls all of these things together. And it reminds me of when we start to talk about creating access and inclusion in the great outdoors, those two words are very separate things. Now, the way that I understand things is that access really does relate to more of the uh, facilitators and maybe some of the barriers that affect people from getting outside into nature and meaningfully engaging with these outdoor spaces. Inclusion, on the other hand, might focus more on the feelings of safety or acceptance, belonging, and just that general feeling of feeling welcome in these outdoor spaces. And so, as we go through this conversation, and I'm going to address this next question to yourself, Carinna, and you too, Brittny, based on your own work and your own lived experiences, what can we do to improve access and inclusion in outdoor spaces?
You want me to go first? Okay. Yeah, great question. And I think that's been a bit of a theme that we've noticed in some of the other sessions as well. And so, one thing to notice too in your own work is, do people see themselves? And so, having that social media representation, your websites, how you're speaking to folks when you're meeting people, how you're welcoming people, are you thinking about their background, their age, their ability, their gender, their culture? It is a lot to think about. And at the same time, that shift is what helps to perpetuate inclusion and accessibility. And so when I think about inclusion, one thing that comes to mind, it's the creation of an environment where everyone really does have that sense of connection and belonging, is treated with respect and dignity, and is able to fully participate. And so, how we do this is curated by the individuals that we're working with. There's some say that there is a bit of a power to be secret sauce. We don't exactly know what it is, but in my next session, I'll share a little bit of some of those insights. But when we're creating a program for, let's say, a group of newcomers or for a group of folks with spinal cord injuries, it starts off with asking them, what are they excited about? So hearing Yenny, I would find her that eagle and I would make sure that you're going to go see it. So, you have to ask, what's the thing that's drawing you here? We don't all have exact commonalities relating to that, but the program needs to be a bit shifted and not a cookie cutter program. So, Power to Be really does have specific risk management, activities, and ways that we facilitate. But when we're building inclusion, we're thinking about how do we do it for that group or that individual that we're curating. When we think about accessibility, that's really about that universal approach. And so it refers to more of the design of products, looking at devices, services, and looking at, again, the people who are experiencing that and asking them directly what works for them and what are those curated devices and specific universal approaches that you can take into building design, trail design, maintenance that creates, again, that flexible experience for people to be able to access it and then feel that sense of inclusion.
Thank you. I'm going to touch briefly on the difference between accessibility and inclusion and how that shows up in our work. Because in my approach, I don't see accessibility as the goal. It's the floor, not the ceiling. It's the avenue that we take to foster inclusion. Can you hear me okay? Foster inclusion, yes, but also it helps us move toward health equity and social justice, which I think those are very important pieces to this conversation that we don't often highlight enough. And just on the accessibility piece, I would really encourage people to move beyond a compliance and checklist approach to accessibility. Treating accessibility as a checklist, I think, can often fall short of a meaningful experience. Just following accessibility standards alone doesn't necessarily add up to a high quality experience or inclusion or a fun experience. We heard John mention that yesterday. That's a big part of why people are getting outside. They just want to have fun. So how we approach this is through this idea of meaningful access that takes a more holistic and human-centered approach to accessibility. So just thinking of the built environment, looking at all those individual components and how those add up and relate to one another to shape someone's experience outside. And we have some resources, and the Rick Hansen Foundation has some resources that kind of unpack that a little bit more, and would love to share those out more broadly for folks working in that space. And I also see accessibility as a real catalyst for creativity. I think when approached as an opportunity rather than as a constraint, I think it really invites innovation and creativity. And I think with that mindset, I think that leads to richer and more thoughtful experiences, as well as better design for everyone. And then getting into inclusion, I just wanted to dive a bit deeper here because I think when we're talking about inclusion for people with disabilities, I think it's also very important to think about and maybe push those boundaries of inclusion a little bit. I think our social frameworks also need to expand in order to move the dial on accessibility and inclusion in an equitable way. Thinking, will people with disabilities also be included in spaces that afford them challenge and adventure? Will they be recipients of this work, or will they be involved as co-creators and leaders in building this architecture of inclusion? I think that's, that bringing the equity lens to this conversation is really important in highlighting those systemic and structural factors that shape how and where people with disabilities are included in outdoor recreation spaces. And I see a big part of this conversation around inclusion about culture. So I'm glad that this question touched on that. Because I do see a need to reframe our cultural understanding of disability, as well as outdoor recreation in general. Who someone who participates in outdoor recreation looks like and how they go about it. And I do see that changing slowly, which is really encouraging. And I think, without addressing that culture piece, the other work can kind of tend to fall flat. We can provide a super accessible park, we can host an accessible event, but without addressing that culture piece, people can still be made to feel like they don't belong. For example, if they're met with comments and fanfare on the trail about how inspiring it is to see them outside. So that culture piece really does play a big role in fostering that sense of belonging and inclusion. And how do we change that? That's a big thing, changing culture. I think, a couple simple things come to mind for me, diverse representation in social media, amplifying perspectives from the disability community, which we've seen here at this conference, which is really encouraging. And then I just want to end off on a very simple thing that anyone can do, regardless of what space you're working on or working in. When I think of people who are working in this space and doing so in a meaningful way, I think two things really stick out to me, which is open-mindedness and curiosity. Having an open mind to a new way of looking at the world, new perspective, being open to being shown otherwise. Also being curious just about the different ways that people show up in this world, just having curiosity about the people in your community. I think it's really important to, get to know the people in your community and maybe find out what their challenges and needs are with respect to outdoor recreation. Getting out on the trail, connecting over a bike ride, connecting over that shared value of being outside, I think really goes a long way in helping to broaden perspective, broaden your understanding of accessibility. I think also helps to dissolve that divide that we sometimes create between people with disabilities and other people when we're all just human. And I think that really does surface when you're outside spending time together.
One thing I'll just add on to something that Brittny shared that sparked a concept or something that we've witnessed at Power to Be is we have an adaptive device called a Trail Rider. You'll see a photo of it later. Some of you might have seen it with Adaptive Adventures brought theirs out. And it's a really incredible tool, but it does involve other humans. And so some people, when we went on the trails, were speaking to anyone who was pushing the trail rider and not the actual rider themselves. The rider decided where they wanted to go, where they wanted to hike, who they wanted to hike with. It was all about them. And yet people on the trail just spoke to the individual, complimented us, and really negatively impacted that experience for that individual. And so not because of what Power to Be did, but after that, we really learned a hard lesson of that the public needs to have more awareness around how you're looking at inclusive hiking. So we shifted our language. It wasn't a trail rider program to begin with, but we made sure to call things an inclusive hike. Whether you're bringing a walking stick, a trail rider, binoculars, someone with you who's that support, a guide dog, whatever you need to create that inclusive hiking experience with the people that you want to be with. And it was a gentle reminder that there's a lot more space for us to have to grow in this realm because of the bias and assumptions that people make when they see people with different abilities. And again, speaking to, the person as the expert of their own experience.
Carinna, Brittny, thank you so much for sharing that. A little bit of a tidbit for folks in this room. I actually have a 14-year-old brother. He is 22 years younger than I am, and he does live with autism. And so every single day when I interact with him, I start to see that he lives and exists in this world that might not necessarily be built to give him the best time possible as he grows up. And so it really gives me heart to know that we have people like yourselves who make it their mission in life to really create outdoor spaces that are safe and welcoming to people like him, so that maybe when I'm gone, he's going to be able to go outside into nature and actually enjoy things by himself and write his own story. I really appreciate that. And so, Yenny, as we've talked about access and inclusion for folks with disabilities, I am imagining that there might be some similarities with your own work in terms of getting people in the Kamloops region settled and comfortable in their new home. I am wondering, for this next question, are some of the strategies and lessons learned from our other speakers applicable to your own work? And if not, what strategies are different and what are you seeing success with?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and asking. I do see some similarities, but working with a newcomer, it's really brings some differences, and our strategy needs to be a little bit different. So at the Kamloops Immigrant Services, how to respond to those barriers and build those strategy around it to meet the newcomer needs, that it's language. And then we have a language program that help them to improve the language in the class setting and also informal setting. Now, regards to those, I just mentioned that we're scared of wildlife. We really need to work with our community partners and then invite a lot of guest speakers. So in the past, we will invite Adventurous Smart. We invite Wildlife Safe. Also, our local search and rescue Kamloops. Many other organizations come to our agency and then deliver some of the information orientation regards of wildlife, and then when they go adventure, what they need to keep in mind, and then what need to prep. But also another thing we will do is because for many people, a lot of things are so new to us because the country we're coming from, example, if you're from the tropical country and you come to move in the Kamloops, here has real winter. You first time to see the snow, and then we before we take in our clients to the winter adventure, we can just take them out. From the very beginning, we need to write a grant. We need to purchase equipment. Thank you so much for BC Parks Foundation, the support. We need to, use one activity example, snowshoeing. It's really entry-free. It's really uh, easy activity, we will say, if you take some lake snowshoeing, but you need to have snowshoes. You need to have sort of a rain gear, right? You need to have like the boots, winter boots. Then you need to let the clients know what they're going to look like before they go on that adventure. We need to be prepped. Now, we will need to give them really clear communication, give them really, really clear guidance, give them really visual guidance as well, and then prepping, get those gear ready for them, help to break those barriers for them. And then also, many people don't drive, or they drive, they're not comfortable to drive in a country has snow. When they come from a country, no snow, right? So now before that, we will invite our local driving school, invite instructor coming to share with us how to look like driving in the winter in Kamloops. Now, we will bring all sorts of the resources to our clients first before we take an actual go outside enjoying those activities. So even then, we share those information, but then when the clients, they have financial barriers, they're not going to go to purchase those so expensive winter boots or expensive the rain jacket when it's not on sales, right? So it's still hard for them. We still will see some of our clients will show up not without good preparation, but they're still having fun. And then we see clients have tears because this is the first time saw snow, and the family with the kids to play in the snow, and that just just warm our heart. And even at the nighttime, and we were able to rent a bus, take our clients to Isabel Lake. If you're from Kamloops, you know where Isabel Lake is. That is in the wintertime. And we took our clients in the full moon. And we prepping some of a propane and a fire. And then we purchased some gloves. So when they feel cold, they have warm gloves. They have a little campfire, fire pits, And then we break those barriers for them to enjoy. And then clients was like so appreciative, was, wow, I can come out at night under the moon. It's just so incredible experience for them. And they will even write us an email telling us that they went back by themselves. Because with that guidance, make them feel comfortable, confident to go out on their own. Now, so this is where we do a lot of fundamental skills and we'll bring to our clients. But this is really neat to work with community, other partners together, because with us, we have some expertise on the settlement journey, but we don't have necessarily a lot of those skills. So we will partner with, I suggest here, the Kamloops Naturalist Club. We'll teach our clients how to do ice fishing on the frozen ice at the lake. How nice is that? I never see that in my childhood. The lake can be frozen and it can walk on the ice, and you can fish coming out. It's just like a magic, right? Now we will work with the city of Kamloops, and we'll also learn a lot of other skills. We will partner with Parks Canada. We're gonna take our clients this June again to learn those basic learn to camp skills. We also were so fortunate we got the grants from our local Rotary Club supporting us. We are able to teach our clients swimming skills. And then KCKC will teach them some paddle skills. So when they learn all those skills, they can be able to really enjoy an outdoor, include the water sports. not only just enjoying the city parks, but city parks little less barriers for a lot of us. But when trails or any parks that's outside of the city limits, that's a lot of barriers. So that's a lot of different strategy we're trying to bring to our clients, and hopefully they can feel, their life not only survived in the new country, but also later on thrive. Thank you.
Yenny, 15 years ago when I moved to Canada, I constantly think to myself, if I had had a caseworker from an immigrant services that helped me and was as passionate about the outdoor space as you are, I feel like I would be outside at this very moment, just frolicking in nature. 100% that was going to be my story. And so, folks, as we start to round out our panel today, I understand that everyone here has had some amazing conversations and have a lot of things to think about as they bring the lessons learned from not just this panel, but over the past 2 days back to their home organizations and maybe even their home lives. So it can be a little bit overwhelming to try and keep all of these things together. And so, my final question to this panel is if I could challenge you to say just one thing to our audience that they need to keep in mind as a result of this session, what would that be when it comes to creating accessible and inclusive spaces for everyone who uses outdoor spaces?
I can start us off. I did just want to start off, there'll be two parts here, but quickly. I just wanted to offer some note of encouragement because I do see a lot of momentum building toward a more accessible outdoors. And I do see, this bubbling up and glimmers of a more vibrant and accessible and inclusive outdoor recreation landscape. I think where I see that shining particularly brightly is within the mountain biking community. And I just really wanted to emphasize to end us off, we talked a lot about barriers here today, just how possible and achievable this is to create a more accessible outdoors. And I'm just going to focus on the built environment because I think that's where I see the most skepticism here. We have thousands of kilometers of trail, we have so many assets, a lot of legacy infrastructure. How are we ever going to make everything accessible? Well, we don't have to, and that's not what's needed to, move the dial on accessibility and inclusion. I think what's really needed in this space is a coordinated and strategic approach and strategically investing in upgrades that are going to deliver the highest impact and have the highest value. The way to do that is to work with accessibility professionals and people with lived experience who can really help to identify those high priorities to focus on, as well as the low-hanging fruit. I certainly come across a lot of that in my work, to be honest. And then just to end us off, I think building a more accessible outdoors, I really see it as an invitation to imagine more and think bigger and more creatively as to how we can build spaces and systems that serve more of us.
Yeah, I think if I were to try and sum up all the different concepts and ideas around inclusion and accessibility is if you're moving into this world or you're already there, really do see the person as the expert of their own experience. You'll hear me say that time and time again. Everyone's lived experience is very, very different, but we all have a common understanding and care and passion for the outdoors. So when you look at your environment, look at it through that universal lens. How can this fit all different ages, all different abilities versus just one medium that you're trying to support? Because when you're focusing on people's abilities and you're focusing on their interests, you're going to be able to perpetuate that for the greater good. And so, and if you can't do it alone, then that's when partnership really becomes key. As to Brittny's point, think about who needs to be invited into those conversations so that you can really see that person as the expert of their own experience, have that universal lens, and remember that nature adapts, and so can we.
Before I answer the last question, may I ask how many organizations here serve for newcomers or have newcomers come to your door, join your program and services? Nice, thank you. So I would say that the one thing I want to include myself taking away from this session is that inclusion, accessibility, it's not just open the door for people, especially for the newcomers. It's we got active to remove the barriers for them. It's because when they move the new country, they really, really facing lots different settlement barriers in order to really enjoy the outdoor activities. And if I would say the one wish list for myself, I wish BC Parks has different languages. As then as many of our organizations, with now AI technology, I don't think that it's difficult to do so. So that would be my advocate. I wish in the future I could see that happening.
So what did I say, folks? Didn't I tell you that we would listen to some incredible stories this afternoon? Can we give our panelists a little bit of a round of applause? Folks, we have had an incredible afternoon here just sharing stories, talking about how we can all work together to create outdoor spaces that are both accessible and inclusive. And I think more than anything, we've brought the message across that we can't do this alone. So we encourage each and every one of you to make connections and start conversations, to be able to keep this conversation going well past today into the future. I did place a few contact information for the panelists right up here on the screen. So if you wanted to take a quick photo of that, we are more than happy to keep the conversations going. And with that, that does close our panel for this afternoon. So thank you very much for joining us. So I may have closed the panel, folks, but we have not had our fill of Carinna quite just yet, I think.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel grateful to be honored to be able to come and chat with you at the end of the day. And so thank you for staying around, but also just for really intently listening to that panel because, again, Brittny and Yenny had a lot to contribute to what's moving the notion of inclusion forward, which is the bit of the theme that we're going to be looking at right now. And so what I wanted to share is that, and I'm sure I'm not alone in hearing this, but inclusion is not just an idea. It's not just a value or something on a checklist. It's a perspective, but it's also a choice that you make and how we choose to navigate and live in this world and make those decisions that thinks about inclusion at the forefront of those decisions. And so, you know, a participant of ours once said to me that humans are now acting more like human doings. We have forgotten about being the human being and what does it mean to be, and to be in community and to be in connection. And that was a really good moment where we were reminded about every single action we're being observed and noticed and watched. And so how do we move forward and think about inclusion as we are human beings, and what does it mean to be? And so when we think about perspective, I want us to just do a quick little activity. May or may not work. You just try it out and bear with me. But if everyone could take their hand up for a brief moment and stick it up in the air. And I want you to move that finger, and you're going to look at your finger, and you're going to watch it as you move counterclockwise. Okay, so just try it out and move that finger counterclockwise. And then as it comes down, keep looking at it and watch and see what happens. Anyone? Anyone notice anything that's happening? It's going clockwise. Thank you. And so what that is the essence of is that inclusion and accessibility is about perspective, and it also evokes in thinking about the different horizons of where perspectives are at. And so some folks may be working in certain roles that takes you at a leadership level where you may be flying at a higher horizon level. And some folks may be working right on the ground. Both perspectives are extremely important. I often, when I'm supporting our staff, I think about, again, the eagles and the swallows. They fly at very different horizon levels, but they're both just as important. So when we're moving into this work around the inclusion movement and thinking about how you can be a caveat to that, I want you to think about that cheesy game and ask yourself about the perspective that you have and what you're leaning into. And so when I was asked to speak about this, it's, you know, again, really, the spark came from a moment where I was starting to work in this world and people kept saying, how do you guys do what you do? What is that essence that really connects people to the outdoors? And, you know, Power to Be's why is that We're here because we truly believe in the power of nature. We truly believe in that essence of connection to the outdoors, and people find themselves. They see things in the forest that answer questions for them from an emotional, social connecting point. It also helps them when they're struggling, and it also gives them a sense to just be. My first program at Power to Be was as a volunteer, and I was working in a program where we had fathers with acquired brain injuries, and we were reconnecting families. Families that went through a massive trauma, and all of a sudden their whole life has slipped over. And these dads were once heroes to these kids, and now they're being cared for. And when we brought them out in nature, those things started to fizzle away. We're able to allow those children and their dads to reconnect in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do in a typical setting. And that's because of nature. That's because of the outdoors. And Power to Be didn't do it alone. We did it in partnership. So when we're really thinking about what access and what inclusion thinks about and what it looks very different for every human, for every interaction in nature, and how you are entering into that world. But remember about, our why and what brought you to this industry, what connects you to the work, what drives you every single day to keep doing what you're doing. But then ask yourself, what's that person's why? Why are they here? It might be a different story, even if you're doing the similar job. And so, when I was asked to come and speak, I want to also give credit that some of the work we're doing is sharing about our approaches. We're teaching others about how we're working in that person-centered approach, how we're moving forward and thinking about people's abilities first. And we hosted an event for CIPSL many years ago, probably over 8 years. And I was very focused on local parks, working with the park sector. And we had, many of you know, Don Carruthers and Hode, who said to me, why are you just thinking about local? Why shouldn't we thinking about Canada-wide? How can we actually have Canada to be known as having the most inclusive and accessible parks and green spaces in the world? And I was like, whoa, that is a big commitment. But my mind was blown. Agency happened, I was inspired, and 8 years later, I've been a part of amazing things, and I'm not alone in some of those things that people have been creating. BC Parks has created their commitment to inclusion. The ORC has created the Outdoors for All Guide. The Stewardship Centre of BC has created the Green Spaces for All Toolkit. BC Parks Foundation is funding access for services including Power to Be, and also servicing our service to teach their ambassadors about those approaches. The ripple effect is happening. And so 8 years later, there is a local, regional, and somewhat even national approaches that are happening. Parks Canada is working on inclusive employment strategies, and things are growing. And you can be a part of that change to move the inclusion movement forward as well. It over here as well. So sometimes we have to think a little bit about, what is getting in the way. And so there are true things that are getting in the way for folks. But you have to remember that people with disabilities, their constant world is living in the worlds of no's, you can'ts, you shouldn'ts, I don't know how to do this. And so how do we shift that to make it a new reality for folks? How do we actually have that ripple effect that happens whenever they go to any green space? It doesn't matter if it's a BC park or if it's a national park or if it's a local park, it feels the same. There is that essence. So people have been speaking about this throughout the conference, and there's a lot of common themes. There's common barriers around the economic barriers people face, the emotional barriers, the social barriers, as well as the physical. And so at Power to Be, when we're working in partnerships with folks, we try and look at it as an individual barrier versus looking at all of them all at the same time. It can feel very overwhelming when you're like, all of these things are getting in the way. It's like, okay, well, let's just tackle one aspect of that. So we think about, is it about transportation? Is it about an overcrowded approach? Can we have quiet hours? Is there a way that we can restructure things to make things a little more safe and comfortable for people? What about your facilities? You've heard lots about that, from trail maintenance to universal design and trail terrain and grade. And then also there's a plethora of adaptive equipment. But Yenny even brought up a really good point in regards to just basic gear and equipment. We had an individual who had a stroke, and he was really struggling to get out the door. He came to Power to Be. He's like, I forgot my lunch. I didn't bring anything. I just knew that I could just show up, and you guys would figure out the rest. And he was right. We gave him hiking boots. We gave him walking sticks. We were able to go by and grab him a lunch. And we brought him, some outdoor clothing. So thanks to the amazing donors that we have a lot of equipment where we're able to offer people to reduce some of those economic barriers that people face so that they can just come and again, just feel that sense of safety and comfort and welcoming approach. So I want you to think a little bit about that. What if Canada's parks and green spaces were the most accessible in the world? What would that look like? How would that feel? Do you have a moment in your mind where you're like, yeah, I kind of felt that. I know what that would look like. So, how we kind of perpetuate a little bit about that thought is we using a bit of a framework in which we're asking people to stretch their minds and again, think a little bit about what would that goal look like. Everyone's goal might be a little bit different, and that's okay because we're trying to tackle things one step, empty slide. Trying to tackle things one step at a time. So this is an experience from one of our participants, just to give you, again, that essence of how they feel when they show up to our services, what kind of opportunities we're offering, and how we're shifting that so that people are not just seeing us as an outdoor recreation organization, we're a service. We're in service to other organizations. We're in service to the great work that other charities are doing. We're in service to the community. And that is why we're able to slowly move this needle on inclusion. We think about people through an ability-centered perspective. We focus on what they can do, what they're excited about. And to Brittny's points, we're really bringing in that sense of inclusion, that equal participation, and that universal language. It's not easy. It takes time. It takes changing policies and approaches. It also takes time to think about your mistakes and what you can change and what are those micro adjustments. But we're all outdoor enthusiasts, and when you go out in the outdoors, you can plan, and then something happens, and you're needing to make a shift or a change. You're throwing out A to B, and you're working on plan C to D. We're used to making micro adjustments. We're used to working in nimble and responsive environments that have a lot of risks, and this is just one of those things now to start to consider, like the many things that you guys are already doing in the outdoor sector. And so thinking universally is taking that hat off and looking at something as a fixed environment only and putting in a ramp and going, sweet, I did it. Now someone can access it. And asking yourself, does this have a lifespan to support all different types of ages and abilities to be able to access this? Were people with lived experiences involved in the creation of these different opportunities? When you're fixing things, building things, constructing things, involving folks that are coming from different cultures, backgrounds, if they're the ones that are going to use it, really will help you with your universal design approach. If you've worked with Power to Be before, you might have heard our 4 Ps. And so it really is thinking about that collective impact. And so when we're moving the inclusion movement forward, we're also reminding some of the park sector partners that, again, where do you want to start? Is it about the common folks that we're trying to serve? Is it about a common purpose that we're trying to achieve? Where are the gaps that people are noticing? When we started our work with BC Parks, the big thing was not necessarily about purpose, but it was about practice. One gentleman said to me that was a park ranger, he's like, someone showed up in a wheelchair and I didn't know how to say hello. I was like, wow, okay, we're starting there. So we talked about the approaches and I said, well, what do you love about your park? And he went off on a tangent. And I said, that's where you start. Don't stare at the chair, look up and say hello, and start about talking about the amazing things that you love in the park. So we teach about different types of workshops around approaches because sometimes it's that training. And if we don't have the right expertise, then who does in your community? Who are those local agencies who are working with people with different abilities, who know about potentially the physio side, maybe the OT side, potentially working with newcomers, different languages and cultures, different genders? Who are those folks that are bringing that expertise to complement the expertise that you have? Because that's how you can really have that collective impact approach to really, again, develop that sense of place and propel your purpose. So an activity we often do with folks, and we're not going to have too much time to do any of this today, but I did engage with a few folks over the conference, is we practice with the GROW model. Some of you might have heard of it before. It's really asking yourself, what is the goal? So we think of that audacious goal that we want Canada's green spaces to be the most inclusive in the world. What would that look like? So some folks shared interpretive signage that ties in different languages. So Yenny, you didn't do this, but this was obviously, you weren't alone in thinking like that. Ties in different languages, backgrounds, Indigenous knowledges, and voices. The current reality of that, lots of high cost, high maintenance, tricky to think about how do you do that in a universal way. So there's some current realities that are getting in the way of that. What are some options forward? Can parks and non-for-profits and for-profits to come together to fund these capital opportunities, to be able to resource and get the right people together to be able to design these? And then find some examples that are working. BC Parks Foundation did a great one in the Shuswap where they have their storytelling that's in, that are actual, you can listen to the voices of elders in the area to learn about the local stories and flora and fauna. And what I've told BC Parks Foundation multiple times, I'm like, that's also amazing from an inclusion point of view. So now you've hit two different angles to support not only heritage and understanding of the local natural history, but also understanding from an accessibility point of view how to get people engaged. Another one that came up is, for everyone to feel welcome and confident in participating in outdoor recreation. So that was one of the goals that someone wanted to see. And for people's reality, that people are currently still facing social and participation barriers. They're still facing that they don't feel welcomed or included or potentially uncomfortable to be able to go to some of those spaces. So what are some options forward? Think about education, think about representation, think about different types of engagement strategies. And way forward, understand those barriers by actually talking to somebody who's living with them, and that can really help to increase that accessibility. So when you're thinking about this after you leave today, is I wouldn't, take some time to ask yourself about the GROW model, where your current realities are, what are some of those goals you have within the organization around inclusion and accessibility, and try and think about one way forward. We did this recently with the Parks Canada folks, and it was really phenomenal to be able to see some of their ideas and how they were perpetuating these goals around inclusion and accessibility. So some key takeaways. Inclusion is everyone's responsibility. Adaptations, as we've heard, they should be fun, fair, universal, and authentic. Don't strip away all the amazing things about the outdoors just because you're trying to create it to be inclusive and accessible. See the person as the expert of their own experience. I can't say that enough. You've heard me say it multiple times, and if you only hear one thing, then that's the one thing to leave with. And we cannot do this alone. Power to Be is built on partnership. We are here 28 years later because of being vulnerable with other partners to learn about how to do this and do it in the right way. And so have a strong foundation in community collaboration. Knowing that, the smallest amount of change can have that ripple effect. So some of you are lucky enough to have this little log with some rocks on a sticky note, super classy. But what the point there is a metaphor. So I want you to take a minute as we're transitioning for me to be shifting off and ask yourself, is there one commitment? Is there one commitment that you can make to move the inclusion movement forward? You've heard from our panelists, you've heard from myself, you've heard from the other speakers. Is there one thing you can do? Because if you have ever tossed a rock into the water, it doesn't matter how small or how big it is, it will have this incredible ripple. And the tiniest little rock can make the biggest amount of impact. And so there's little rocks there for you to take as a reminder for yourself so that you can be part of the inclusion movement and move this forward collectively. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that we'll